I've been meaning to create a simpler version of my larger character makeups for a while now, so I'll start doing that with this mummy makeup. To work out what I can and can't get away with, I looked at the prosthetic version and thought that the most important elements of that would probably be the cap plastic and the exposed teeth. So I wanted to keep those two elements. So I am going to create another sheet of cap plastic to apply. This time the easier version will be hand painting it on with a chip brush rather than using an airbrush. And instead of using the back of a silicone mold, I'm just going to do it directly onto my workshop table. So because this cap plastic is acetone based, there are only certain kinds of plastic that you can paint it onto. Other kinds of plastic it will bond to. Any kind of varnish it's going to ruin. So you have to be really careful when you select what you're going to paint your cap plastic on. If you're unsure, do a little test patch on an area that you know is not going to be seen, and then you can see if it will release easily off the table or if it will not release off the table. So to make this a little bit easier to remove from my table, I am going to paint down a layer of Vaseline first as a release. Then I've mixed my cap plastic in with some acetone to thin it out a little bit, and then using this 2-inch chip brush, I'm going to paint a layer over my table. Once that layer has dried, I'm going to paint a second layer over the top. And then once that second layer is dried, I'm going to start using my fingertips to break up the surface of this cap plastic. It does kind of stick to itself and create those cobwebby patterns. Once I'm happy with that, I am going to put a layer of baby powder over the top and then use baby powder underneath as I brush this up off the table, just so that it does stop sticking to itself and it's a little bit easier to apply. Next, I'm going to prep Leah's skin, so I'm going to remove any dirt or oils with some alcohol-free witch hazel, and then I'm going to put a little bit of Sweat Stop down just because it was quite a hot day when we were applying this makeup. Now to build up the exposed teeth, I decided to use some outer kit silicone. I'm using 3rd degree for this, and the reasoning was I couldn't do it in wax because the wax does tend to crack off quite quickly, especially in areas of high movement, so I didn't think wax would even last through the duration of this tutorial. I didn't want to use latex because latex does get quite rigid and it's quite hard to move the mouth when it's on there, and it also is difficult to get a realistic skin texture or nice edges with latex. It tends to look kind of crinkly and kind of like oatmeal, so I wanted something that would look a little bit more realistic, be a little bit more smoother, have nicer edges, and also something that wouldn't pull out that peach fuzz, very fine facial hair that most people have, which latex tends to do. Another option could be gelatin, but I find that when I apply gelatin, it has a very small period that you can blend it out and put details into it. When I've used it, it stayed very hot for a very long time, had a very minute period where it's okay to put it onto the skin, and then it cools down quite fast and becomes unmovable. So I decided not to use gelatin because I just find it quite difficult to work with in that way. So I'm using 3rd degree for this. You can do quite a good build up with out of kit silicone because it does have enough time to blend out the edges. It has more movement and softness to it than any of the other materials. So to use 3rd degree, you mix up equal parts of A and B, making sure you clean off your metal mixing tool in between each container so you don't cross-contaminate them. Once they are thoroughly mixed on my little mixing board, I am going to apply it straight onto Leah's face. You don't need any kind of adhesive, it does adhere quite well. I built this up in several layers so that I would have time to work without all of the silicone curing at the same time. So I started with the lower lip, and then I put in place these really cheap little plastic veneers that I bought on eBay. Then I put a layer of 3rd degree on the upper lip, and I placed the upper front teeth veneers into it. It is quite sticky, so it does hold the teeth really well. It's a lot easier to place teeth into the 3rd degree than pretty much any other material. While the first 2 layers are curing, I'm going to use the leftover 3rd degree to put some rotted spots on the forehead and one on each cheek. Next, I'm going to put a little bit more 3rd degree over the top of the teeth and add a little bit more detail around the teeth on the chin area. Next, I'm going to put some cap plastic over Leah's brows to make them disappear. So I'm going to start with some Prosaide Adhesive. This is going to be brushed through the brows so they are stuck firmly against Leah's face. And then I'm going to cut out some cap plastic and push that down onto the Prosaide Adhesive to cover her brows. Next, I'm going to use a very small amount of acetone on a brush to blend out the edges of this cap plastic so that you get a nice smooth transition onto Leah's skin. Then I'm going to place a couple of dots of Prosaide Adhesive around Leah's eyes, and I'm going to wait for that to dry and then put some of the cobwebbed cap plastic over the top of her eyes to hide them without needing a prosthetic. I didn't want to use any Sculpt gel over the eyes just in case it gets caught in the eyelashes or the eyebrows and pulls them out. I didn't want to use latex for similar reasons, and then using wax again, if you were to put wax over that area and try and push it in and blend it out over the eyeballs, I just feel like you'd be putting too much pressure onto the eye and the eyelids. So I opted to use some cap plastic and layer it over that area instead, gluing it down to the brow bone and down underneath the eye, but not onto the actual eyelids. Again, I used a very small amount of acetone to blend out those outer edges so that it blends down into the skin. This is quite thin cat plastic, so it really doesn't need a lot. Next, I lay down a few more dots of Prosaide across Leah's face and wait for them to dry. This is to anchor the larger sheets of cat plastic that are going to go over the eyebrow, eye, nose, and some of the mouth. So first, I place it on the left side of the face and blend away any edges, and then I place another sheet over the right side of the face. The right side didn't have enough holes or gaps in the cat plastic around the mouth area, so I did dissolve extra cat plastic around there so more of our teeth would show through, and it had too much holes around the eye and the nose area. It showed too much of the eye and eyelashes coming through. So I did a third layer of cat plastic over that nose and eye area just to help disguise it further. Once I had the cat plastic over the face in a way that I was happy with, so hiding most of the eyes, but having some of the teeth showing through and having all of the edges blended out, then it was time to start painting it with some alcohol activated colors. I started with the Necromania palette using the Vial Bile color and a fan brush, doing a light layer over everything to bring that cat plastic closer to skin tone and not quite as white. Next, I went in with some Darth Moss just to break down the color further and make everything look a bit more dirty and a bit more rotten. Next, I went in with Bisque from the Bluebird character palette, and I used a cut-off chip brush to spatter this light color over the face just to bring the colors a bit closer together and make everything look a bit more uniform. Now I've got some purples from the European Body Art Contour Effects palette. I'm using the maroon, intense purple, and some graphite and aged tattoo to do the gum colors. I start with the maroon to do a general purple outline, and then I'm using the intense purple mixed with some graphite to deepen the color around the gums. I do find this a lot harder to do than the prosthetic just because the pure silicone is a lot harder to paint than encapsulated silicone. It just kind of sits on the surface and beads a lot more. And obviously also the texture in this mouthpiece hasn't been thoughtfully sculpted, it's just kind of been smeared on some silicone. So it is a little bit harder to paint on top of something that hasn't been sculpted in a definitive way, if that makes sense. I also put a little bit of that aged tattoo and the graphite color over the teeth to make them slightly grayer and bluer as well. Now I've mixed up a custom color from some of the browns in the Contour Effects and the Autopsy palette, and I'm painting this into the general eye socket area so that it will look a bit more recessed and will give the face more contrast. I'm also painting this color into some of the rotted areas that we put down with the 3rd degree and in between some of the holes in the cat plastic. I also bring this color down around the mouth area to darken some of the gums and the teeth. Now I've got some darker browns on my fan brush. I'm using that to go around the face to add a little bit more rotted colors and make the face look a bit more broken down and more uniform. Next, I'm going to put some powder into Leah's hair. You can use baby powder, setting powder, any kind of powder to make the hair look more dusty. Ideally, mummies wouldn't have really any hair, or their hair kind of goes weird like it's fallen out, but it's just kept in place based on how they're lying. But obviously putting down a ball cap is a lot of time and effort, so we just kind of made it dusty and put it into a ponytail at the back and covered it in bandages. So I'm going to use the same bandages from the last video that have already been distressed and stained, and again we're going to wrap that around the head but let a lot of the features show through because there's not much point in covering up all the work you just did, and then cover up the neck and the shoulders where we haven't applied any makeup. I'm also going to pull out some strands of hair just so it looks a little bit more messy, and then apply a little bit more powder, aka dust, over the top of everything. And this is our finished simpler mummy. So to compare it to the other mummy, this one took an hour, maybe an hour and a half to apply versus a 3-hour application time of the one with full prosthetics. I will show you the detail of the two pieces side by side. So obviously the eyes have a lot more detail and a lot more recessed because of the prosthetics, making the rest of the face protrude around it. And the gums and the mouth is a lot more sculpted and a lot more detailed, but you do get a general same vibe from them because of that cat plastic layer and because of the similar paint job. In general, we found the silicone pieces moved a lot better because we have deadened them quite a lot, so they're very soft silicone, whereas the 3rd degree is kind of a harder silicone. We were surprised that the movement did get easier over time and it became a lot easier to move the mouth by the end of the application. And we were surprised that it did stay on perfectly the whole time despite talking and laughing and it being a kind of a hot day. But granted, it was probably on for about an hour. If you were to wear it all day, I feel like the 3rd degree would come away a lot faster than the silicone appliance just because there's no adhesive underneath it and because it is a little bit stiffer, so it doesn't move as well with the skin, making it come away from the skin faster than a softer appliance would. We also found that Leah had more vision through the sculpted silicone pieces because we did allow those middle eye pieces to be devoid of any silicone and any cap plastic, so she had those vision holes, whereas to disguise her eye and her eyelashes with no prosthetics, we had to layer a few more bits of cap plastic over it, which made the vision a little bit more hazy on the easier version. So for me, the comparison between the two makeups would be the simpler version is something more for like a cosplay or a costume party, something where you want it to be a faster application and it doesn't need to last all day or look super realistic, versus the prosthetic version, which is more something you would have for a short film or something where you needed it to last a full on-set day, which might be 10-12 hours, and something that you wanted to look a bit more realistic and the actor could move a bit more in and see a bit more in so that it doesn't impede their performance as much. Also, this is for everybody that commented on the last video that the little nostril bits annoyed you. This is just for you guys. Honestly, Leah didn't really notice that they were there, and I didn't really notice they were there, so it's always funny when you guys all collectively pick up on something that's like, okay, I didn't really think about that one. But now the removal of this one is also simpler and faster because there's not as much Prosaide on the face, and obviously there's not a bunch of silicone prosthetics that need to be removed. So for the third degree, you can get underneath an edge of it and gently peel it off. It does come off without really needing a remover. And then for the cap plastic, where it's been glued down to the skin with some Prosaide adhesive, I'm going to use the Bluebird Get It Off remover on a cotton pad and then rub it into the adhesive until it releases from the skin. After we have removed the cap plastic and the silicone from the skin, I'm going to remove any extra Prosaide left down on the skin, especially the Prosaide left in the eyebrows. We want to get some Super Solve on a cotton pad and just rub it into the eyebrows until most of the Prosaide acrylic has broken up and come out. And then any bits of Prosaide left on the face or any bits of paint left on the face, I'm going to use some Super Solve just to get that off so that Leah can leave without looking like a mummy. And then to finish it off, we're going to use a hot towel that has some steam coming off it to help steam out any of the leftover Prosaide on the face and also to help remove any of that oily remover. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you find this interesting, the comparison between like out of kit versus prosthetics. Let me know if it made you feel like, wow, prosthetics are cool and totally worth it because look at that detail and movement, or whether it made you go, like why would you use prosthetics because you can do something somewhat similar out of kit. I'm really interested to know if you can see a difference or not. Yeah, let me know your comments, your thoughts below. I love chatting with you guys about special effects makeup, and I'll be back soon with more videos, probably more smaller things rather than character makeup straight away. I mean, maybe I say that every time now, I don't know. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Leah, what is your favorite thing about the 21st century?